My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Is it possible for humans to communicate with plants? What would plants share with us, and how might this contribute to our personal healing? Joining me again on Destination Unlimited this week, Laura Aversano shares her story of awakening to the divine powers of plant spirits and the elemental world of nature where plants are intelligent beings. Laura Aversano is a medical and spiritual intuitive and ancestral empath. Descended from an ancient lineage of Sicilian adepts and seers, she's been communicating with the spirit world since childhood. She is trained in plant medicine and shamanism from various indigenous traditions and in many modes of healing. Her website is lauraaversano.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and book, The Divine Nature of Plants, a medical intuitive's guide to plant spirit medicine. Please join me in welcoming back to Destination Unlimited, Laura Aversano. Welcome back, Laura.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Laura, for our listeners meeting you for the first time, please share your path and how your intuitive and healing path opened.
Sure, absolutely. I grew up in a family of seers. It is a part of my Sicilian lineage and heritage. And when I was young, I had the ability to speak and see beings beyond the veil, which I ascertained were real, just like you and I, just like my family was. And my gifts grew over time and culminated in a healing crisis at age 19, which expanded and augmented those abilities. And I started training in energy medicine and various healing modalities. And it kind of took off from there.
Wonderful. What do you offer your clients in your practice?
A myriad of things. Interestingly enough, my practice has grown for almost 30 years through referral. And most of my clients tend to refer to me as either a medical intuitive, a medicine woman, a shaman. It's a plethora of ways that I hold space. I offer medical intuition. I offer counseling and development. I offer communication with pets, communication with those who are in comas or unconscious. I offer nutritional energetic counseling. I used to offer hands-on work. I offer plant spirit medicine work. Again, I think the list kind of can go on and on.
And one of the things that I remember you talking about was ancestral healing. Do you still do that?
Absolutely. That was the one thing I just remembered, as you said, that I forgot to mention. Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. So encoded in our cellular memory is ancestral DNA. It's a field called epigenetics. It's a study of how gene expression is altered through trauma, ancestral environments, emotions, thoughts, and various other factors that literally express themselves through our health, through our perspectives, through the ways in which we see the world, through our psychic connection with the divine, and through our spiritual, let's say in spiritual genetics is what I like to refer to it as. And many times those ancestors are still working to resolve their challenges beyond the veil. And when that happens, it can influence and impact our lives in many ways. And when somebody calls me to work with ancestral healing, I look at the challenges that they're presenting me with, and then I track beyond the veil their ancestors with similar challenges and try to see where the patterns or miasms might be stuck, might be holding, might be influencing and or attaching, and do my best to hold space and offer tools to help them unwind.
Now, today we're going to be discussing your new book, The Divine Nature of Plants, A Medical Intuitive's Guide to Plant Spirit Medicine. But before we do that, the last time you were on, we discussed your book, The Light of God, Divine Locutions on Evil, Karma, Reincarnation, and Healing. What inspired that book, and what do you share with readers?
Sure. So that book was inspired by the events of 9/11, actually before they happened. I remember, gosh, thank you for reminding me of the story, actually. I remember it was, I think, a year prior to the events of 9/11 that in prayer, Spirit guided me to write a book on good and evil. And I was given the title of The Light of God. And there seemed to be a rush to write that book and to hold space for those words to come through. I did not know what I was getting myself into in terms of what would come through me. And I just remember being so hurried, and everything seemed to be hastily unfolding. I remember experiencing the energetic shifts in many realms above me. I remember experiencing the energetic shifts in clients literally a year before with their pulses. And so many times I can see the collective happening in people's tissues, in people's cells, around their aura, as above, so below, before it happens actually in the physical realm, in this realm that we are existing in. And up to the time that I was finishing that book, I remember the myriad of souls that would come through my home. And honestly, they were traumatized. Some of them were screaming. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what they were doing. And from my understanding, other shamans were also experiencing these energies or these beings months before or months prior to the events of 9/11. I even remember running over to my mom's house when she lived here in New York and asking her what she felt because the energies were so intense. And as I was getting to that last chapter, I remember in my prayers, I kept saying, you need to finish, because this book needs to help some of these souls cross through. And I kept saying, cross from what? What's going to happen? What collectively was going to happen? And I realized with all those souls that I kept seeing pass through the walls of my home, that something magnanimous and devastating was going to take place in our world. I think I just numbed myself from the visions because I couldn't believe what I was seeing until it
Mm,
finally happened.
mm. You know, it's interesting how sometimes we get a message through synchronicity, and it's not necessarily what we think it's about. And I had a calling because I was doing Reiki practice, and back in the 80s and 90s, if you wanted to go into a hospital and do any kind of laying on of hands, you either had to be ordained in a faith where that was one of the sacraments, or you needed to be a licensed massage therapist. And obviously, with a full-time job in industrial technology, I did not have the time to go to school for 2 years to become a licensed massage therapist. However, through a wonderful series of synchronicities, I found out about the New Seminary of New York. I attended and graduated in 1997, and my whole intention was to be able to go into hospitals and do laying on of hands. Needless to say, when 9/11 came along, another reason for the ordination came to fruition, and that was I was called to be a chaplain for the Red Cross at the Family Assistance Center that they had set up in Manhattan to work with people who were either grieving the loss of loved ones in 9/11 or who were waiting word of their loved ones after 9/11, and also the first responders. And it was such wonderful work between going to my day job every day and then every evening going to this Family Assistance Center for a matter of months. And I'm grateful for the fact that I had that calling for the one reason I thought it would be, but for obviously the other reasons unfolded, and they have continued to unfold throughout my life, and I'm grateful for that.
Wow, bless you. That's wonderful. And I think there's still challenges in New York with doing hands-on without having that massage license.
I don't know. I'm not. I don't have an active Reiki practice anymore, so I'm not familiar with it. But in any event, other things that have unfolded and the opportunities to serve people in many capacities, and I'm grateful for that calling. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Now, we just talked about your just published book, The Divine Nature of Plants. What inspired that book?
Actually, this is its third iteration, I'm happy to say. The first book was written when I was 28 years old, the first iteration, and published, I believe, when I was 30 or 31. Actually, it was supposed to be published right after 9/11, and they halted its release because of 9/11. So, what inspired that? Again, in prayer, um, I was guided to write a book on plant spirit slash some shamanic medicine. And what inspired that for me was my own personal healing journey and my foray into the use and relationship with nature and plant spirit medicines.
And how did your abilities come about with plants?
Sure. So, again, I mentioned my healing crisis at the age of 19. I started to become increasingly empathic to people walking by me, near me, to various illnesses and ailments that would just rush through my body. And along with those ailments coming through my body, or somebody would mention a person's name and I can tell what was making them sick. And it could be something in the present, something in the past, something in the spiritual realm, something in the mental realm, something in the astral field. Along with that, I would also hear, sense, or see remedies. Some of those remedies were food based. Some of those remedies were plants. Some of those remedies might have been visualization or other psychological tools. But nutrition and nature really tugged at my heartstrings. And so I would go out and I would sit. At that time, I lived in the country upstate. And so I would sit in nature, I would sit with the plants, and I'd be able to pick up a plant, just like many indigenous cultures did before language was even used, before formal language was used. And I could tell exactly what the plant was used for, what ailments, what illnesses, on a physiological level, on a psychological level, and on a spiritual level. And I would start to take notes and write things down. And then later on, I would compare my notes to traditional books on herbology. And I was correct. And that prompted me, along with my guidance, to write a book on plant medicine. And then years down the road, the second iteration of the book, published by Llewellyn, a story was added. I thought I'd add a more personal perspective of how I used plant spirit medicine and working with the spirits in my own journey. Well, and now here's the third iteration, published by Inner Traditions, which I'm very pleased. It's a beautiful book.
And when did you first recognize that plants were actually communicating with you?
During that time when I had my healing crisis at 19.
And how did they speak to you?
It was more claircognizance. It was such an echo through every tissue, through every cell, through every story. They told stories of illnesses through my being. They told stories of relationships through my cells. It was one of the most incredible experiences that I ever had. And then with that, one of the elementals, because plants come with their elementals, their fairies, the plant spirits, and along with that, there came a spirit guide who would appear to me and also communicate the abilities and properties of plants.
Hmm. You know, it's interesting. I'm a tree hugger from the time I was a kid in the 60s. And I always had a sense of a relationship with nature, all forms of nature, birds and squirrels and all types of animals, and also with trees. And I love oak trees. There's something about oak trees that just sing to me. And then when I moved into the home that I live in now in Queens, New York in 1995, Unbeknownst to me, there was a bed of azaleas in the garden. And I started seeing them bloom early in spring, and then they'd be gone in a few weeks. And I wondered what was the nature of that, and I researched it, and I found out that's what they do. They come, they spend 3 weeks or so, or 4 weeks here with us, and then they go to the next iteration. And during a time of grief, a poem came through me about the azaleas and what they represent. I called the poem The Lesson of the Azaleas. May I share that with you?
Please, I'm very excited to hear it.
They return each spring in their full glory without our hand intending. Leave in 3 weeks a very short story, but no sadness in this ending. For they grace us with signs of summer's return, lifting our spirits with cheer. And we'll know they'll be back and blossom again, one full turn of the wheel of the year. And the lesson they share with beauty and grace, transition is just nature's way. A reminder we'll all return to this place and blossom on some shining day.
Wow. That feels very jovial in my heart space. It was so playful and just beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, again, at a time of grief, I was grieving the loss of my mother. And at that time of grief, that message came through. And I think that's one of the ways that, for me personally, the way plants speak to me. So, how does someone begin their journey with a specific plant?
I think by first and foremost going outside into nature and just honoring that we are not the only beings on this earth, that we are not the only creations that have a story to tell, that the earth which carries us, the soil which is underneath our feet, the asphalt which may be underneath our feet, has a story, has a lineage, has an ancestral history. And there are narratives, generations back, that carry us and carry our stories that we live in this world. And so for me, a beginning would be just to go outside and just for a moment, just quiet your mind. And no matter where you are, I hope it's nature, but if not, just hang out on the asphalt if you're in a city, because underneath that asphalt, there is still earth and there is still story. And just sit with it for a while and ask it to share when it's ready what it needs to tell you.
And for those who are not necessarily intuitive, what are the messages? How can they hear those messages?
You know, I have many clients that will call me and say, Laura, I can't hear like you or may not be able to see like you. And I don't think it's about necessarily hearing or seeing. Sometimes it comes through a kinesthetic feeling. It might be a twinge in your heart. It might be a tightening or contraction in your lungs. It might be an unwinding in various muscles. It doesn't have to be, we have all these incredible senses, but people seem to focus on sight and sound.
You know, it's interesting that everything in the universe is actually a form of energy. Even material things are a manifestation of energy. So if everything is energy, we're energy, plants are energy, all of nature is energy, the connection should be natural.
Absolutely. But we've lost it, as you know. We've truly lost it. I know nature's sad about that.
How have we lost that connection?
With progress, there will always be positive consequences and negative ones. I do believe how we are increasing technology. I've seen it. I've seen it literally. I've seen the interference of the frequencies of technology challenge the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. When they put up a few cell towers near my home during the pandemic, I watched as the behavior of squirrels changed. I watched the behavior of my fig trees shift a little bit. and grow a little differently. I watched my grass grow differently each spring. And I know they've done studies on this. And so I think we're not aware of what we're doing. And I hope to God that we become aware before it's too late.
As a kid, I grew up in Brooklyn, and I grew up in a fairly urban area. But there were still patches of trees and gardens and plants throughout the area. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones, and we didn't have all the forms of digital communications that people spend more time on now than they do with people incarnate and family and friends and loved ones. And I just remember as a kid just marveling at the season changes and the birth and life, and then the leaving of some of the annuals that would come by. And I think maybe today we need to reinforce with kids of the current generation and the past generation or so this marveling at the beauty of nature, the miracle that nature truly is.
I completely agree, as well as I think we need to offer kids an understanding of what it is like to be grateful for nature's presence in our lives. I don't think
Gratitude.
they have that. I don't think adults have that now.
Gratitude. That's something that's missing from a lot of people's lives, being grateful for everything and anything that has blessed their lives. And I belong to a group called Morning Gratitude, and every day we express what we're grateful for that day. And many times people express gratitude for nature and all of the gifts that this world brings to us.
That's beautiful. That's
Absolutely.
beautiful. And sometimes I used to share in classes, just when you go outside, if you're in nature, just lean down, put your hand on the grass, and just say thank you. It
Yeah.
takes a minute, it takes a second.
Yeah, absolutely. My guest, Laura Aversano, the new iteration of her book, The Divine Nature of Plants, A Medical Intuitive's Guide to Plant Spirit Medicine. Laura, please share with our listeners where they can get all of your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Thank you. I have a website, www.lauraaversano.com. You can also find me on Facebook, and you can purchase the books wherever books are sold. My latest books come through Inner Traditions.
And we'll be back with more of Laura and the divine nature of plants after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Let's take a moment to breathe. Deep inhale. Extend your spine. Remain focused on what you're doing. If safe to do so, exhale slowly, leaning to one side. Inhale back to center. If safe to do so, exhale slowly to the opposite side. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org. This message is brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and the Ed Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Laura Aversano. We're talking about her book, The Divine Nature of Plants, A Medical Intuitive's Guide to Plant Spirit Medicine. So, Laura, tell us a little bit about the plant spirits. What are those plant spirits like?
That's a really interesting question, Victor. I think it's subjective for everyone. I know in my book, I shared about the plant spirits or the elementals that avail themselves to me. But as I share with people, especially when I'm teaching classes on plant spirit medicine, the right spirit will come for you or attracted to the plant's vibration in the way that you need it most. And it doesn't mean there might not be another elemental that might not come another time when somebody calls in that same plant.
And tell us, you had mentioned fairies. I think divas is one of the words for some of these elementals. What are they really like?
All right, I can tell you, I remember one time I was working through grief. And for dandelion, I remember dandelion flowers were coming through my bedroom walls along with little children that were just running rampant, trying to wipe my tears off my face. It was the sweetest experience that I remember just being blessed to have. And I've never encountered an unkind plant elemental. That I will say.
Hmm. I had mentioned the azaleas in the first segment, and whenever I see them blossoming, I have this sense that there are these little fairies flying around them and watering them and giving them love and bringing them up.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. That, in my last interview, there was something that I shared that the medicine of every plant and the spirit that attaches to it will change as your vibration and your frequency changes, as well as your needs change.
Mm, absolutely. How do they heal the plants? How do they heal?
That is such a large question. They heal first and foremost vibrationally and via frequency. They will work with much effort, not effortlessly, with much effort to match or balance the vibration that a person or an event, a trauma is giving off. And so they will heal and balance various layers of the auric field as well as tissue to the extent that they are meant to.
So they have different levels of healing.
Yes.
And if I
Yes.
were to lie down in the grass and on a particular day, and let's say I was struggling with something emotionally, those blades of grass or the accompanying plants or trees that are in my vicinity would tune into that energy and
Yes,
connect to me accordingly.
absolutely. And again, I think the way I see it, even with other forms of spiritual medicine, there's a thy will be done energy as far as I'm concerned. They will work to heal you in the ways that they are supposed to or that you are meant to heal.
Do they ask permission before they start?
I believe so.
And how do we recognize that request for permission?
I don't know if many of us do, because again, I don't know how many of us have cultivated that relationship with nature. I think that one of the ways that we can try to recognize it is, again, once we shift our way of thinking and our purview of the world to some form of gratitude, I think we start experiencing the world differently.
I think you're right. I know that when I want to ground myself, I'll take my shoes and socks off and put my feet into the grass and just relax. And I automatically have a sense when I do that, that not only is my energy being grounded by Mother Earth, but that the blades of grass and the plants around me and the trees around me are acting as a conduit for that energy.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I remember the last class that I taught on plant spirit medicine. I asked the students, let's go outside. It was in a center in Westchester, New York. We went outside. I said, I want everybody just to sit on the ground, sit on the grass for a little bit and tell me what you're feeling. And we could actually feel, and at that point, nobody had a relationship with the actual energies of the land around the center, but only the center itself. So we sat and we can feel what was going on. And everybody pretty much was in the same opinion of the trauma that the collective was going through. We went back inside the center. We started working with the earth and the collective trauma that we were struggling with. I can't remember what was going on. It was something that was happening in the world that time. And then when we went back outside towards the end of the class, I asked everybody again to sit back down after we had worked with the collective trauma and the earth elementals. And the difference in the land, the acknowledgement, the sense of inner peace, the happiness, students started to laugh. They were jovial. They could feel the grace that was emanating through the blades of grass that was just dancing on their feet. It was so precious.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Can anyone communicate with plants, even people who don't? I think we sort of touched upon this in the first segment, but even people who don't really have any intuitive gifts, can they communicate with plants?
Again, my answer is the same. I think they can. I think, again, the first thing you have to do is hold a plant. And even if you can't physically hold a plant, meditate. Meditate on a plant that's calling you. Get a journal, write things down, see what stories it has to tell you. You might think it's all your mind, but how do you really know it's not?
Mm. Now, you had taught a class for ARE of New York at our last psychic fair. You had graciously come in and done a presentation at the spring psychic fair. And one of the examples you had given was there was a situation with an herb that a person needed to heal with. Do you recall that, or can you share a comparable story?
Were we talking about basil?
Basil, that's right. It was basil.
I'm not remembering the story, but I'm remembering the plant.
Right.
Okay, let me think. You know what? I'm going to share my own personal story. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
And I actually think it's in this book. So I remember I was working on, I'm trying to remember, it was a challenge that I was having health-wise. And this is going back probably 20 years ago. And I remember, it's a little bit of a sad story. I went to see an incredible Caribbean herbalist that is in Lower Westchester. And she had given me an herb, and she called it godbush. And I tried to find out what this godbush was. I had no idea. Every time I researched it, I just couldn't find it. And I thought it was really odd. And I started to make tea out of this godbush. Now, for some reason, she had said she only told me to take a teaspoon a day. I started to have 1 or 2 cups a day. So I was having 1 or 2 cups of this godbush a day, and I was feeling like I was climbing Mount Everest. I was feeling amazing. And at the same time, I kept noticing my cat, Alexis, was lying down every night on my liver, which was a new behavior for her. And there was a period of, I'd say about 10 days, where something shifted in me. There was an incredible shift on a cellular level, and something told me to stop, like literally right away, just to stop. So I stopped it. And then I noticed that my kitty cat, Alexis, was starting to get sick. And she was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And she was healthy before that. I took her to the vet, and she had been to the vet like a few months prior. And he said, she just got liver cancer. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, it just sometimes comes out of the blue. And I went, that's interesting. She was lying down on my liver. And he said, she doesn't have long. And I remember calling up the Caribbean herbalist, and I said, you know, that plant you gave me, I stopped taking it. And I said, I believe that it was toxic on some level. And my cat ended up taking that from me. She said, well, how much did you take? I said, 1 to 2 cups a day. And there was a pause in her voice. And she said, I've never heard of anybody taking 1 or 2 cups a day and living, Laura. I said, but I think you told me 1 or 2 cups a day. She said, no, I told you a teaspoon a day. And when I looked it up, it was mistletoe. I actually finally found it. And I had researched it and couldn't find anything. So it was like I wasn't meant to find out what it was, but it was a form of mistletoe in the same genus. And she's like, you need to get to the doctor and get all these tests. Interestingly enough, when I advised traditional physicians, they did the appropriate tests, cardiac and liver test, because of the detriment to that genus of mistletoe. I was actually perfect. My cat wasn't, but I was. it did what it needed to do, and Alexis did what she needed to do to help me.
Thank you.
Interesting story.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's say that you don't have a specific condition that you're dealing with. How do you know which plants are just generally good for you and your overall health?
Sometimes I hear friends saying, wow, this plant keeps popping up in my yard. Or I keep walking by, the street and I'm noticing all these dandelions. Or they're in a nursery and there's a plant that draws to them. And that's when I say, I think the plant chose you, just like when you're in an animal shelter and the animal chooses you.
And then taking that one step further, if you have some type of condition, how do you know which plants will work for that condition?
Here's what I've personally found. When you find your signature plant, whatever its pharmacology is, I think that plant can work with you in a number of ways to heal a number of maladies on many levels. I truly think so.
And how do you know that that's the plant for you?
Again, for some reason, it'll keep showing up. It'll just keep showing up in some way.
And other methods of communication that people will recognize that in addition to the plant showing up for them?
Let me think about that, if I may, for a moment. So, besides showing up again, I think we have to make a concerted effort to really, truly go sit in nature and be present and be still. And again, I'm going back to gratitude and appreciation. And I think when we start holding that kind of space, we start to see a tree being more than a tree or something that's just taking up space. We start to see the dandelion more than just a weed. We start to understand that there is a lineage to what grows on the earth, that we're not the only ones entitled to be here.
Can you give us a couple of more examples of specific plants that work on specific conditions? We had talked about basil before. How about a couple of others?
Sure. Hawthorn is one I'm recommending as of late. Hawthorn is incredible, especially for those struggling with panic attacks and anxiety. It's really great to help with your heart chi or your heart pulse. It's incredible to work with in relationship issues and challenges and struggles. It really, for me and for clients that I recommend it to, helps balance the masculine and feminine energy when there's self-doubt, when there's a lack of faith, when there's a lack of confidence. So that's one that I really like to recommend again as of late.
Another example, please.
Sure. We can go back to dandelion. Dandelion is an incredible liver tonifier, detox herb. It works incredibly well with the lymphatic system. I love it for holding space for grief, for child loss, for helping somebody to cross over or who's stuck when they've just passed on and crossing over from one realm into the next. It's one of my favorite.
And we both live in New York City. Is there one that's common to New York City for New York City residents?
I don't frequent Manhattan anymore, but in my backyard, I think like in many, I do think dandelion is a frequent one.
Interesting. I remember that song by the Rolling Stones, Dandelion, Don't Tell No Lies. Dandelion will make you wise.
Yes. Amen. Amen. It's true.
Absolutely. And we're talking about basil. What are the properties of basil?
Basil, interesting. I think emotionally, basil is really good for crankiness, irritability. Somebody who's a little off-grounded, and it's kind of like grounded, leaving your body, grounded, leaving your body. Somebody who's got a lot of resentments or regrets and has trouble letting go of things.
Is there another common kitchen herb that will work on this in this way?
Kitchen herb for what I just mentioned about basil, or just for anything in general?
Anything in general.
Sure. Rosemary is incredible on a physiological level for upper respiratory ailments, for phlegm that's stuck in your lungs and other parts of the body. Rosemary is also good just for balancing. And again, for some people, it can be cooling, and for others, it can be warming. I think it really helps quiet the mind.
Beautiful. My guest, Laura Aversano, her book, The Divine Nature of Plants, will be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute? When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Adopting a teen was more fulfilling and rewarding than we ever thought it would be. We just kind of knew from the beginning that we were family.
Visit adoptuskids.org to learn more. Brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Laura Aversano, her book, The Divine Nature of Plants, a Medical Intuitive's Guide to Plant Spirit Medicine. Laura, do plants speak to one another?
Yes, they do. They've done studies on that, especially at the roots of trees and other plants just have these exchanges and conversations underneath the soil, as well as I do believe their petals, also just the frequency and vibration. It's the harmonies are so etheric and it's so beautiful. And so visually, when somebody might visit a garden, it's the auric field above the plantings, amidst the trees, is it leaves me breathless, honestly. It's a wonder. It's a wonder.
I was going to ask, how can healing with plants impact the earth?
It can impact it greatly. It can impact it greatly. Again, I think when we start to connect with nature, we are moving from what I believe on a psychological level, spiropsychological level, is entitlement to gratitude and to mutual respect and understanding that we are not the only beings of creation with a story to tell. And so there's an honoring and a reciprocity that happens. And in those patterns themselves, there is healing.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering if that energy would extend beyond the plants into all of the earth. We've been having so much difficulty with natural occurrences right now, natural disasters. And I'm wondering if more people would face the earth and face the plants with gratitude every day and appreciation that that energy, that message would be conveyed from the plants to Gaia, to Mother Earth, and perhaps rest her a little bit.
I think it has that potential. I've seen when I've gone out into the earth and when I've witnessed trauma from generations back, which I have, from various wars, so on and so forth. I've sat, I've prayed, I've communicated, I've made offerings, I've perhaps even planted something. And I've gone back then weeks later to bear witness to the change and the shift so that I know that on a psychic and a spiritual level, things have changed. And just like with human bodies, when things start to change as above, so below on a psychic or spiritual level, there is potential for it to shift physically if that is what is supposed to happen.
Have you seen any changes in plants during the current struggling times that we have?
Absolutely. Yep. Even with clients utilizing plant medicine, the plants that have been their signature plants or that I've worked with them for years, all of a sudden don't work in the same ways. Or what I see it as, or how I see it is, they don't need those plants anymore. Something has shifted. So plants, along with us, will evolve and will adapt to the trauma and the collective issues that are happening. And similar to the way that our vibration shifts, their frequencies will work to adapt to the changing and collective events of our world.
I remember studies by a Japanese scientist who was working with water molecules.
Mm-hmm.
And when he would send positive, loving messages to the water, it would take on a specific shape and form. The molecules would have beautiful, artistic form almost. And when negativity was expressed, that would also reflect in the molecules. So we're talking about the same thing with plants, aren't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I mentioned when they put up cell towers during the pandemic, I noticed the behavior of the squirrels and the birds in my yard had shifted, as well as the way that my fig trees were growing. That shifted as well.
Mm. I have to ask this question because I have several people in my family who are very allergic to pollen and other plant allergies. What about people who have plant allergies? Can these be healed naturally?
Of their allergies or their other ailments?
No, the allergies.
Yeah, I do believe their bodies can be supported. I've worked with medicines or natural supplementation that are not plants to help people balance or overcome their allergies. So yes, I do believe that allergies can be healed, but it doesn't mean everyone's allergies can be healed. So it's like if you're constant, like I have this one client who lives in the midst of a forest and she has an allergy to mold. And with all the different spores that are going around in this forest, she's not getting better. So sometimes you need to take the person out of the environment. Because there's the microbiome of the forest is as it should be. But if your body can't handle everything and you've tried everything, perhaps it's time for you to change your environment.
Tell us a little bit more about a couple of examples of your personal experience working with clients and the plants that you used and or the plant essences that you used and what they were for.
Sure, thank you. I remember working with one person many, many years ago, and her mother struggled with a form of dementia. And prior to that, and this was an elderly client, and prior to that, I remember that her mother was institutionalized, and that mother used to endure shock treatment therapy, which was pretty hard. And my client in the present had struggled with migraines off and on. And every time this client would speak about her migraines, I would sense and see or hear her mother's spirit behind her, struggling through those shock treatments. I'm thinking it might have been Rose that I recommended, and not that it was. First, I had seen Rose between the auric fields of both the person beyond the veil, her mom, and both my client. And that rose, that beautiful pink rose, seemed to mirror the vibration that was emanating from the trauma from her mom and from the uncertainty, doubt, and fear from my client. So I recommended a rose tincture, or even for my client just to be around roses, to bring them into her house every week.
You know, it's interesting. Years ago, I was teaching a weekly meditation class in Brooklyn. And one evening, before anyone showed up, I was putting the chairs in place. And all of a sudden, I smelled roses. And I looked around the room. I looked, the windows were all closed. The air conditioning was on. And this essence of rose was just so beautiful and just took me away. What do you think that might have been?
I think that was somebody from beyond the veil trying to give you a message.
Yeah. Yeah.
I truly do.
In retrospect, when I think about it from in the years past, I had a sense it might have been the essence of Mother Mary.
That's beautiful. And again, I think everybody has their own relationship with the elementals that come to them and the reasons that they come. So for you, more than likely it was Mother Mary. For somebody else, it could have been their great-grandmother.
Absolutely. Can you give us one more example of a plant that you've worked with a client with?
Sure. Okay. I remember a client with a neurodegenerative disorder, and I had looked into his energy field and saw the environmental stressors in this lifetime that were embedded in his cellular memory. I also had asked about his mother and father, and if they also were surrounded by this one environmental toxin that I was seeing in the miasms around all of them. And he said yes. And I believe, in looking at his intestinal microbiome, as well as some of the way the neurons were firing in his brain, that this chemical toxin had made an imprint via mom and dad. I didn't ask about the grandparents, so possibly the grandparents, and came through him and contributed or influenced the neurodegenerative disorder that he was struggling with. And so I had to kind of sit and wait, because we had both masculine and feminine, being that mom and dad were around us. And he was also struggling in his current relationship. And so I usually wait, like I do with my other work, and I wait to see what comes through. And for some reason, burdock seemed to be the plant of choice in helping the emotional bodies of both my client, his mother who was still living, his father who was deceased. It matched the frequencies of the chemical toxin that I was seeing in all of them. And it helped balance all of those realms.
Beautiful. What would you like readers to take away from the divine nature of plants?
Over the years, I've heard people tell me that when they read the book, the energies just jump off the pages. So I really appreciate hearing that, because I think the book is alive. It's alive with joy. It's alive with that gratitude that I keep mentioning. It's alive with love. It's alive with spiritual medicine. Read it and absorb it and utilize it.
Wonderful. My guest, Laura Aversano, her book, The Divine Nature of Plants, A Medical Intuitive's Guide to Plant Spirit Medicine. Laura, one more time, please share with listeners where they can get all of your wonderful books and learn more about your wonderful work.
Thank you. My website is www.lauraaversano.com. You can also find me on Facebook, where I try to contribute positivity each day. And my books are published by Inner Traditions, and you can buy them anywhere books are sold.
And tell us a little bit more about your practice and what you offer your clients.
Sure. There is a contact page on my website to get a hold of me for sessions. And if you read my website, it'll share a little bit about the various kinds of sessions I do. So most of my sessions are focused around either medical intuition, ancestral work, and those can be combined, or plant spirit medicine.
And Laura had mentioned her contributions on Facebook and other places. She is a daily contributor to ARE, the Edgar Cayce Association of New York, and she posts her wonderful wisdom and beautiful messages and lessons every day. And Laura, we're grateful to you for doing that every day.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. And if I may, I also want to mention I've just started to enter into the world of technology a little late, and I have my first real virtual upcoming class on boundaries the end of August. And again, that's something, if you go on my website and contact me, I can provide all the information.
Boundaries is a very important lesson. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining us today and sharing this beautiful message.
And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.